Hi, Sunday school kids. So remember our stories that we talk about in Sunday school. They're not just stories, they're 100% true because they're all found in the Bible. So for those of you that are going to follow along, go ahead and open your Bibles to Daniel chapter 6. So who is one of the people that we've been talking about for the last few lessons? This person was one of the main people we talked about in our story last week. He was an Israelite, and his name starts with a D. Do you know who this is? You're right. It was Daniel. Well, we have another story about Daniel today. So in our first two stories in the book of Daniel, Belshazzar was the king. He was the ruler of the Chaldeans. There were people who had taken the Israelites captive. So as we heard last week, this is shared with us, the Medes then came over and conquered the Chaldeans. So now the Medes ruled both the Chaldeans and the Israelites who had been taken captive. And the king of the Medes' name was Darius. He was a very powerful king, so he appointed 120 leaders and 3 administrators to help him rule his kingdom. Daniel was one of the 3 administrators, meaning he was one of the top 3 officials in the kingdom under King Darius. So we see in the book of Daniel, chapter 6, verse 3, that then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Well, this made the other rulers really jealous. They didn't like it that Daniel was going to be set ruler over them and over the whole kingdom, especially since he was an Israelite. He wasn't even one of their own people. So they began to watch Daniel, find out if he did anything wrong, anything that could come and tell the king or complain about to the king. So the king removed Daniel from this leadership position. But because Daniel was such a faithful and righteous man, even though these men watched everything that Daniel did, the Bible tells us they could find no fault with him. They couldn't find anything wrong. This is amazing. What an amazing man that they couldn't find anything wrong with what he was doing. So these men were like, well, he said, there's nothing we can find wrong because David lives an upright life and he followed all the rules. He lives in a way that no one can find anything wrong. So these men started talking to one another. They said, the only way we're going to be able to find anything wrong with Daniel is if it's something to do with the connection of Daniel and Daniel has with his God. So do you know what these wicked, jealous men did? Well, they went to King Darius and they said, "Oh, king, live forever." That was something they often said back then to their king. Something that would show respect to the king. And they said, all your counselors, high officials, and governors are agreed that the king should set up a law that any person that makes a petition to anyone else other than you, O king, for the next 30 days should be cast into the den of lions. What a wicked rule for them to try and set up, but what a way for them to try and trick the king to be able to get rid of Daniel and harm Daniel. So the king went ahead and they said, come on and sign the rule, sign this into law, sign our injunction so that it will be law, and according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, it can never be changed once you sign it. So Darius did. He went ahead and he signed this law, that no one could make a petition, no one could pray to anybody but King Darius for 30 days. Now, when Daniel heard that King Darius had made this law, he went back to his house, and his window was open towards Jerusalem, and he knelt down 3 times a day and prayed to God. He could have chosen to hide his faith for 30 days, or to be more secretive, not be as obvious about his prayer, but he didn't. He chose to boldly and faithfully continue to pray to God and to live out his faith before the other leaders. So then these men went to the king. They said, "Oh, king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to anyone except for you for the next 30 days should be cast into the den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then these men said to the king, "Well, Daniel, who is one of the exile from Judah, he pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, for he makes his petitions, praying 3 times a day." Now when the king heard these words, he was very distressed. He was really upset. And he was convinced he wanted to find a way to deliver Daniel. So he labored all day. All day he worked on trying to find a way for Daniel to not be thrown in the lion's den. Then the men came back to the king and they said, "Now, O king, the laws of the Medes and Persians, it can't be changed. So you signed the injunction and it's established, and Daniel needs to get thrown in the den of lions." Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. And the king said this to Daniel. He said, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." So they put a stone in front of the entrance to the den of lions, and the king sealed the stone with his own seal, letting everyone know that that not to open it, and that it was by the king's authority that this happened, and that nothing would be able to be changed concerning what had happened to Daniel. Then the king went to his palace, but he was so upset he couldn't sleep at all that night. He spent the whole night fasting and he couldn't sleep. So the next day, the king went to the den of the lions. He had the stone moved, and as he came close to where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. He was really upset. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before God, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Then the king was exceedingly glad. He was so happy to see that Daniel was safe and that no harm had come. And the king commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den, and no harm was found on him. Nothing had happened. The lions hadn't done anything to Daniel, because Daniel had trusted in God, and God had sent his, as Daniel said, had sent his angels to protect him. And the king commanded the men that had been jealous and wicked and maliciously accused Daniel, that they would be thrown into the den of lions, them and their whole household, their whole families. And before the Bible tells us that even before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions had already attacked these people that had done wicked things against Daniel. So guess what happened next? Not only was the king excited that Daniel was safe, he made an order that everyone must respect the king, the God of Daniel. They would all worship the one true God. And King Darius wrote to all the people and nations and languages, everyone in his kingdom. And this is what he wrote to them. "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So not only did Darius who had signed this law, and now he realized that God was the one true God, and he sent this proclamation out throughout his whole kingdom. And the Bible tells us that Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus and the Persians. So Darius the king and the next king that came after him. So we see in this story that Daniel remained faithful to God and worshiped only the one true God, even when this meant risking his own life. He could have chosen to hide his faith for those 30 days. He could have not prayed in a way that they would see that he was worshiping God. But Daniel chose to boldly continue to worship God and pray to God 3 times a day, which is what he had done previously, and he chose to continue to do that. And we are told that Daniel's fellow leaders could find no fault with him. By this we know that Daniel was following all the rules of the kingdom, where he lived, where he was a ruler and also a captive. But when it came to not being allowed to worship or pray to God, this was something Daniel could not do. He was being asked to do something that broke God's law, and that went against the commandments God had given. Daniel chose to take a stand, even though it meant that Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. But God chose to send his angels and protect his faithful servant Daniel. that's our story for this week.
Whatever you do heartily for the Lord and not for men. Colossians 3:23.